So our reading from today is from a poet named Mary Oliver. And for those of you who like to read as well as listen, dogchurch.com, dogchurchknox.com, it's in there. So it goes like this. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshoppers? This grasshopper, I mean. The one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who is moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who is grazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I've been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? I love that. And I have to be totally honest. When I picked that reading, I completely forgot about Father's Day. It wasn't even on my radar. But I'm not alone in that. I watched a comedian talk about Father's Day, and he said he did research on celebrations of holidays. And you know what the number one holiday that's celebrated is? According to this guy, no. But it's number two. Number one is Christmas. In the United States, anyway. So Christmas, number two, Mother's Day. You know where Father's Day is? 20th. Arbor Day is 15th. All right? So I'm not alone in for not thinking too much about Father's Day. It just doesn't happen much, right? So, but the reading still works for Father's Day. It really does. Because in the poem, she asks us, tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? What is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? And I have to say today, being a father is one of the things I've wanted to do. Being a father is one of the things I like to do, I want to do. Because being a father has taught me and continues to teach me so much about life, about myself and about living life. Most importantly, I think what if I had to condense it, what being a father has taught me is life is filled with beauty and joy. Life is filled with beauty and joy. And life is filled with difficulty and sadness. And it's both. All of it goes together. And being a father showed me that more than anything. And I'll tell you a story about it. Some of you might have heard this, but sorry. It's a good story. So back in the day, my son Dylan, who's now in his 30s, and my daughter Kaylee's in her late 20s, and Miles in his mid-20s. Back in the day when Dylan was 7, Kaylee was 4, Miles was maybe a year and a half. I came home from one of those long days, long days at work. And I came home just dragging, not just tired, not just exhausted, but kind of numb. You know what I mean? Numb from being out in life, numb from being with people, and going, God, they're different than me. And then feeling so weird about how different I felt. And then wondering, is there something wrong with me, or is there something wrong with them? Or what? So that was the numbness, just kind of numbed out. And I came inside, and my kids met me right at the door. And they called me Papa at the time. Papa, come here, Papa, come here. And I was just like, oh my gosh. More people, right? I just need a break. I need a break, right? And they're like, Papa, Papa, Papa. But my heart, as hard as it felt at the time, started to melt a little bit, started just a little bit. Because golly, who doesn't want to be greeted like that? They really wanted to see me. That was pretty cool. So I like I said, my heart melted just enough to go with them. And I could hear on the TV music playing. And who knows the Wiggles? Right? One person, two people. So the Wiggles were like the thing. They were the group for kids back in the day. They were like the Beatles and Taylor Swift all rolled into one in terms of how excited my kids got when the Wiggles played. And they had music and they had dancing. And I knew what they wanted. They were going to want me to come in there and dance with them. And I was like, I don't want to do this. But once again, my heart melted just a little bit more. And I went in there and at first was just kind of watching them dance. And it was Dylan and Kaylee. It was just my oldest and middle. And as I watched them, I thought, man, they're different. Dylan was just like a good oldest son. He was really following the moves that the guys did, and he was really worried about doing it right and getting it right. And he did. He got it right. And Kaylee was just trying to keep up with him a bit, but she's got a little bit more free spirit, so she would add her own little moves in there every now and again. And as I watched them, like I said, they're different. And if they're different, and they're from the same mother and father and the same genetic line, how in the world can it not be true that we're going to be different? That the human race is going to be different. And somehow or another, in that difference, what I could see is uniqueness. The beautiful uniqueness that each one of them held. And so my heart melted just a little bit more, and it started to get a little softer. And I was a little bit more open up to life. But then I started thinking, well, I wonder where Miles is, because he didn't get into the Wiggles quite as much as they did. But, he'd usually be there. And kind of almost just on cue, and Miles was different, he came into the room. And I had taken my glasses off, and I can't see distances as well as up close. So he was a little bit away, and I looked, and he had his hands like this. And I was like, what the heck's in his hands? And then I looked down at his face, and it was like he had paint under his eyes. I was like, where the heck did he get paint like that? And then I noticed he doesn't have his diaper on. He doesn't have his diaper on! And there it was, right? There's being a father. And in a sense, there's life, right? Because life has the beauty and the joy of dancing to the Wiggles, and then the other stuff. All right? And that's life. And I learned that being a father. So happy Father's Day. And think to yourself today, what do you want to do with your one wild and precious life? And I'll throw that in, and I'll throw that out there just to be like a fathery kind of person. It's pretty cool.